Thanks, Kieran. So today we essentially have PlaneKeeper to replace JobKeeper. That's my name, of course, not the government's. But no doubt we have taxpayer funds propping up the airlines here. As we revealed earlier this week, aviation grants tied to flights and seats, 800,000 discounted fares, the government says, in fact, to certain locations, many in marginal and coalition seats. So how do we know the airlines are going to pass on these savings, or are they going to just pump up the prices like they said and say there is a discount? Here is Laura Jays asking Alan Joyce how much transparency is going to be around these fares.
Will you be advertising the original price and the subsidised price in the interest of transparency for these cheap flights?
So what we've been doing with the government is we've guaranteed what the airfare is currently, which is the median airfare, and what the discount will be on those airfares.
Okay.
So, for example, Jetstar have committed to a $44 airfare from Sydney to Gold Coast, 57 from Melbourne to the Gold Coast, 83, I think, from Sydney to Cairns.
Okay.
And that's off the current published airfare. And we'll be completely transparent with the government about what was there previously, what we offered, and reconcile it back to the 800,000 airfares that were offered.
And Peter Stefanovic this morning said to Deputy Prime Minister and Transport Minister Michael McCormack, what about state border closures impacting this?
What happens if you buy a ticket and then the Premier shuts a border?
Well, we don't want premiers to do that, and I think as the vaccine rolls out, as JobKeeper comes off, we're through those election cycles. Surely common sense will and has to prevail. We need to get back to some sort of pre-COVID normality.
No guarantees there, and it's a question you'd expect from a Queenslander living in Sydney. Why does the package not include flights to Sydney and Melbourne, where CBDs and CBD hotels are in trouble? Sure, it goes to Avalon outside of Melbourne, but in Melbourne, I'm told the occupancy rate is 35%. Tourism Accommodation Australia saying that of Sydney as well. Here is a list of the seats that these grants service through the airport. Government pretty sensitive to this. Durack, well, it's a safe coalition seat. And then we move on to Broome. Leichhardt, 4.2%, definitely marginal. The government hoping Warren Inch runs again to hang on to that one. And we have Cairns, Dawson, George Christensen's seat, Fisher on the Sunshine Coast. A lot of safe coalition seats there, as is McPherson. But then you have the choice of one location really in New South Wales, Merimbula, Eden, Monero, 0.8% to Labor. That's one the government had hoped to pick up. Richard Marles is in Corio, but Corangamites are marginal, it's nearby. Then Mayo, hopes of getting that off Rebecca Sharkey, 5.2%. And the Tasmanian seats, Bass, just 0.5%. That's a handy tourism injection there. Braddon, 3.1% to the Libs. Lingiari, Warren Snowden is retiring, 5.5% margin. And Scott Morrison, well, he was saying this was ludicrous to suggest it's tied to marginal seats today.
I'd say it's absurd. That's ridiculous. I mean, the northern parts of Tasmania is the regional part of the state, which needs that additional support. We already have lots of flights going into Hobart. We're already supporting those flights through the program that the Deputy Prime Minister has already announced. And so this is providing that additional support into those locations. And so this has been based on the advice we've received about those areas that best can use this support. And as the Deputy Prime Minister has said, it's an initial list.
So the government says they've chosen the locations for where these flights are discounted from where the airlines say they want the assistance, where there's lower demand. You can get your flights from April 1. Here are the indicative flight routes the government has nominated, with a final list to be determined depending on demand. You'll see there Alice Springs, marginal seat, Darwin, not marginal seat, not serviced. I'm sure I'll get some messages out of the Prime Minister's office for saying that. Sydney to Gold Coast, Canberra to Gold Coast, Avalon to Gold Coast, it goes on. Melbourne to Cairns, Sydney to Cairns, Darwin to Cairns, and Sydney to Proserpine, Sydney to Hamilton Island. Gee, there's some good opportunities here. Let's just hope the airlines do the right thing. The government says the ACCC has got the capacity if they're not doing the right thing. That's Launceston to Melbourne, Devonport to Burnie, Broome. There's a lot of opportunities there, a lot of flights. Kangaroo Island, Mayo, but not to Adelaide. There's also something that tourist operators are saying, read this, on the quiet, cheap flights, cheap tourists. Now, what that means, they need people to spend big. And we know international visitors and people buying cheap flights, it doesn't create as much of an impetus to their local economies because people who buy cheap flights, maybe that includes me, tend to spend less on holidays.